The signature on the loan documents looked exactly like mine. Perfect curve of the R, the distinctive way my A leaned slightly left, even that habitual flourish at the end that I'd developed in law school. For a moment, sitting in my home office at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, I almost convinced myself I had signed these papers. Almost. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. But I'm Rachel Winters, senior partner at Garrison & Associates, specializing in financial fraud litigation. I've built a career on spotting forgeries, on finding the microscopic inconsistencies that separate authentic signatures from carefully practiced fakes. And as I held these documents under my desk lamp, magnifying glass in hand, I could see it. The pressure points were wrong. The ink flow hesitated where mine never did. Someone had traced my signature. Slowly, carefully, perfectly enough to fool a bank officer who sees hundreds of signatures daily, but not perfectly enough to fool me. The loan amount glared up at me from the page. $180,000, secured against our jointly owned home. The home I'd worked 70-hour weeks to help purchase. The home where I was currently sitting, alone, while my husband Marcus attended yet another networking event. I set down the magnifying glass and reached for my phone, then stopped. Old habits from years of litigation kicked in. Document everything first, react second. Instead, I photographed every page of the loan agreement, the approval letters, the disbursement records I'd discovered buried in a file marked warranties in Marcus's study. He'd been sloppy, or perhaps arrogant enough to think I'd never look. The boutique's name appeared repeatedly throughout the documents. Luminous Designs, LLC. The address was in the Pearl District, Portland's upscale shopping area. A quick search on my laptop revealed a trendy women's clothing store that had opened 6 months ago. The website featured artfully arranged photos of minimalist interiors, racks of expensive-looking garments, and a smiling woman with auburn hair and sharp cheekbones standing in front of the store. Sienna Chase, owner and creative director. I stared at her photograph. She was beautiful in that effortless way that made you feel like you were trying too hard just by existing. Her bio described her as a visionary, entrepreneur bringing sustainable luxury fashion to Portland. What it didn't mention was that her vision had been funded by forged documents and my financial security. My phone buzzed. Marcus. Event running late. Don't wait up. Love you. I looked at the message for a long moment before setting the phone down without responding. The casual lie, delivered with a digital kiss, suddenly felt like evidence. How many other late nights and networking events had actually been spent with Sienna Chase in her boutique, planning their future with my forged signature? The discovery had started innocuously enough. This morning, a letter from Pacific Trust Bank had arrived, congratulating us on our home equity loan and reminding us that our first payment was due in 15 days. I'd stared at it over my coffee, confused. We hadn't applied for any loan. I would have known. I handled our finances, reviewed every statement, tracked every expense with the precision that made me excellent at my job. Marcus had already left for work at Cascade Digital Marketing, where he'd been employed for the past 3 years as a senior account executive. I'd tucked the letter into my briefcase, intending to call the bank during lunch. But my day had exploded into crisis management when a client's case took an unexpected turn, and the letter had slipped my mind until I'd found it again at 10 o'clock tonight. One phone call to Pacific Trust's after-hours automated system had confirmed my worst suspicions. A home equity loan in both our names, approved 6 months ago, with $180,000 disbursed to a business account I'd never heard of. The automated system had been happy to text me copies of all documents for my records. Now those documents lay spread across my desk like accusations. I pulled up the account information again. The loan payments were being automatically deducted from an account that was also in both our names. A checking account I didn't know existed. According to the bank records, Marcus had opened it 14 months ago, right after I'd been promoted to senior partner, and my salary had increased substantially. My direct deposits were still going into our primary account, But apparently Marcus had been making regular transfers to this secondary account. Small amounts, nothing that would trigger my attention during my monthly reviews. $50 here, $200 there. Over 14 months, he'd accumulated enough to make several loan payments without my knowledge. The sophistication of it was almost impressive. Almost. I leaned back in my leather chair, the same chair where I'd prepared hundreds of cases, dissecting financial crimes far more complex than this. The irony wasn't lost on me, Rachel Winters, the lawyer who'd sent white-collar criminals to prison for fraud, whose expertise in forensic accounting had made her a fixture in Portland's legal circles, had been defrauded by her own husband. My hands were steady as I created a new folder on my laptop. Personal matter, confidential. Years of litigation had trained me to compartmentalize, to transform emotion into strategy. The hurt would come later. Right now, I needed to think like a lawyer. First question: when did it start? I pulled up our bank statements going back 2 years, the ones from our primary account that I reviewed religiously. Everything had seemed normal. Mortgage payments, utilities, groceries, the occasional dinner out. Marcus's paycheck deposits appeared like clockwork every 2 weeks. My own deposits, larger after the promotion, came monthly. But now, looking with different eyes, I could see the small transfers. They'd started 13 months ago, just a week after I'd mentioned my promotion. $50 to car maintenance, $100 to office supplies. Never enough to question, always with a plausible explanation if I did. Second question: how did he forge my signature? I picked up the loan documents again, studying them under the magnifying glass. The signature was too perfect, too consistent across multiple pages. This wasn't someone practicing in private and then signing in the bank. This was traced. Which meant Marcus had a source document, something with my real signature that he could copy. I pulled open my desk drawer, retrieving the file where I kept copies of important documents. Our mortgage papers, our car titles, our marriage certificate. I flipped through them and my stomach dropped. The marriage certificate was missing. No, there it was, tucked in the wrong section. Someone had taken it out and replaced it hastily. My signature from 5 years ago, when I'd been Rachel Hartley, before I'd become Rachel Winters. Before I'd built my career. Before I'd learned to look for the small signs of deception. I photographed everything, backing up the files to 3 separate cloud accounts. Evidence preservation was second nature. Then I began a methodical search of Marcus's study, photographing as I went. In the back of his bottom desk drawer, behind old tax returns, I found a notebook. Inside, practice signatures. Pages of them. My name, written over and over, each attempt getting closer to my actual signature. The bastard had practiced. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I sat back on my heels, the notebook open in my lap, looking at pages of my own name written in my husband's hand. How long had this taken him? How many nights had he sat here, perfecting the curves and loops, while I was downstairs watching television or reviewing case files? My phone buzzed again. Marcus. Actually heading home now. See you in 20 minutes. I took photographs of every page in the notebook, replaced it exactly where I'd found it, and returned everything to its original position. Then I walked calmly to our bedroom, changed into my pajamas, and settled into bed with a legal thriller I'd been meaning to read. When Marcus came home 15 minutes later, I heard him pause outside the bedroom door before opening it quietly. "You're still awake," he said, surprise evident in his voice. I looked up from my book, my reading glasses perched on my nose. "Couldn't sleep." "How was your event?" "Good, productive." He loosened his tie, the expensive silk one I'd bought him for Christmas. "Met some potential clients." "That's wonderful," I said, returning to my book. "There's leftover pasta in the fridge if you're hungry." He studied me for a moment and I could feel his assessment, wondering if anything was wrong. But I'd spent years maintaining a poker face in courtrooms and negotiations. My expression revealed nothing. I ate at the event, he said finally. I'm going to take a quick shower. I nodded, turning a page I hadn't actually read. As soon as the bathroom door closed and the water started running, I checked my phone. The files were backed up. The evidence was preserved. Tomorrow, I would begin building my case, but tonight, I had one more thing to verify. I pulled up the business registration records for Luminous Designs LLC. Public information, available to anyone who knew where to look. The company had been registered 8 months ago. Owner, Sienna Chase. Registered agent, Sienna Chase. Initial capital investment, $180,000. The loan had been disbursed 6 months ago, but the business was registered 8 months ago, which meant Sienna had been planning this before the money came through. Had she known Marcus was married? Had she known he was forging his wife's signature to fund her dream? I dug deeper, pulling up property records, business licenses, social media profiles. Sienna Chase, age 32, previously lived in Seattle, moved to Portland 14 months ago. The timeline clicked into place like evidence at trial. 14 months ago, Marcus had met Sienna. Shortly after, he'd started siphoning money into the secret account. 8 months ago, they'd registered the business. 6 months ago, my forged signature had secured the loan. This wasn't impulsive. This was planned, calculated, executed with the kind of precision that spoke to long conversations and careful plotting. On Sienna's Instagram, public, thankfully, I found photos of the boutique's grand opening 6 months ago. There, in the background of one shot, partially obscured by a clothing rack, was Marcus. His face turned away from the camera, but I recognized his watch, his posture, the distinctive way he stood with his weight on his left foot. He'd been there, at her grand opening, celebrating the business he'd helped fund with my forged signature. I took a screenshot, added it to my evidence folder, and closed my phone as the shower turned off. Marcus emerged from the bathroom in his pajamas, his hair still damp. He climbed into bed beside me, and for a moment I could almost pretend everything was normal. That we were just a couple settling in for the night. That the man beside me hadn't committed fraud and betrayed every promise he'd made. Big day tomorrow? He asked, plugging his phone into the charger. Just the usual, I replied, setting my book on the nightstand. Couple of client meetings. Some research. He settled under the covers, his back to me. Night, Rachel. Good night, Marcus. Within minutes, his breathing deepened into sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind already constructing the case. Elements of fraud, misrepresentation, knowledge of falsity, intent to deceive, justifiable reliance, resulting damages. I had evidence of all 5. The forged signature, the secret account, the practice notebook, the disbursement records. Any first-year law student could prosecute this, but this wasn't just any case. This was my marriage, my life, my carefully constructed world revealing itself as a facade. I thought about the woman I'd been 5 years ago, signing that marriage certificate. Rachel Hartley, newly promoted associate at a mid-sized firm, brilliant but still climbing, still proving herself. I'd met Marcus at a friend's wedding. He'd been charming, attentive, supportive of my ambitions in a way that felt revolutionary after a string of men who'd been threatened by my success. I love that you're smarter than me, he'd said on our 3rd date, and I'd actually believed it was refreshing. Now I wondered if he'd seen not a partner but an opportunity. The promotion to senior partner had come with a substantial salary increase, nearly triple what I'd been making before. I'd been so focused on proving I deserved it, on handling the increased caseload and responsibilities, that I hadn't noticed Marcus's attitude shifting. Or maybe I had noticed but dismissed it. The way he'd started working later, the new attention to his appearance, the vague mentions of networking opportunities. How many nights had I sat at this desk, reviewing case files while he sat in his study, practicing my signature? Sleep was impossible. At 3 a.m, I gave up and moved to the living room with my laptop. I pulled up everything I could find about Sienna Chase. Her LinkedIn showed a background in fashion retail, management positions at several boutiques in Seattle. No mention of Marcus, but then there wouldn't be. Nothing on her social media suggested a relationship. She was careful, professional, but I found them together in the background of other people's photos. A restaurant opening in the Pearl District 4 months ago. A charity event for sustainable fashion 3 months ago. Each time, Marcus was carefully positioned out of the main frame, but visible if you knew to look. They'd been hiding in plain sight. I opened a new document and began outlining my case. Not just for the fraud, that was straightforward, but for everything. Divorce would be inevitable once I revealed what I knew. In Oregon, a no-fault state, I wouldn't even need to prove adultery. But I wanted more than a divorce. I wanted justice. The fraud was criminal. I could press charges. Marcus could face prison time. But as I sat there in the pre-dawn darkness, I realized that wasn't what I wanted. Prison was too easy, too impersonal. I wanted something more precise, more devastating. I wanted to dismantle the life he'd built on my forged signature, piece by piece, until he understood exactly what he'd taken from me. By the time dawn broke, I had a plan. Phase 1, documentation. I would continue as normal, gathering evidence. Every text message, every bank record, every photograph. I would build an airtight case, the kind I'd built dozens of times for clients. Phase 2, leverage. Once I had everything, I would approach Sienna Chase, not as the wronged wife, but as the lawyer whose signature had been forged. I would present her with a choice: cooperate with my investigation or face conspiracy charges as an accomplice to fraud. Phase 3, confrontation. Only after securing Sienna's cooperation would I confront Marcus. By then, he would be isolated, his accomplice turned witness, his fraud documented beyond any possibility of denial. Phase 4, consequences. Not prison, but something better. Complete financial devastation. I would recover every penny of that $180,000 plus damages. I would ensure his professional reputation was destroyed. Companies don't hire account executives who commit fraud. I would take everything he'd built with my money, my name, my trust, and I would reduce it to ashes. And then I would walk away, head high, reputation intact. The coffee maker beeped. I'd set it on timer the night before, back when I was still the woman who didn't know her husband was a criminal. I poured a cup and stood at the kitchen window, watching the sun rise over Portland's skyline. Somewhere out there, in her boutique filled with stolen money, Sienna Chase was probably sleeping peacefully. Somewhere upstairs, Marcus was doing the same. Both of them unaware that the lawyer they'd defrauded had already begun building the case that would destroy them. I took a sip of coffee and allowed myself a small smile. They'd chosen the wrong woman to deceive. I spent the day at my office, conducting routine work while my mind processed strategy. My paralegal Nina noticed my distraction during our case review meeting. "Everything okay?" she asked, closing the file we'd been discussing. "You seem somewhere else today." Nina had worked with me for 4 years. She knew my tells, the small signs that something was off. It was what made her invaluable: attention to detail, ability to read people, absolute discretion. "Actually," I said, making a decision, "I need your help with something. Personal and confidential." Her expression shifted immediately to professional concern. "Of course. What do you need?" "I need you to request some documents. Not through me. I can't be directly associated with the request. I need the loan application and approval records from Pacific Trust Bank for a home equity loan taken out 6 months ago." I slid a piece of paper across my desk with the loan number. Nina picked it up, glanced at it, and her eyes widened slightly as she recognized my address. "This is your home," she said carefully. "Yes. And I didn't sign those loan documents. Someone forged my signature?" Nina's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing shock. "Marcus?" I nodded. "I discovered it last night. I need to build a case, Nina, and I need to do it quietly. I can't let him know I'm investigating until I have everything locked down." She was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she nodded, her expression hardening with determination. "What else do you need?" Over the next hour, I outlined the investigation. Nina would request the bank records under the guise of a potential fraud case. Technically true, just not specifying it was my fraud case. She would pull business registration records, financial statements for Luminous Designs, anything that would show the money trail. The boutique owner, Nina asked, taking notes, do you think she knew the signature was forged? I don't know yet. That's what I need to find out. If she was an innocent recipient, that changes the approach. If she was complicit, that's conspiracy. Nina looked at me with something like admiration. You're treating this like a case. Because it is a case, I replied. The fact that it's my life doesn't change the methodology. Evidence, investigation, strategy, execution. I've done this 100 times. I just never thought I'd be doing it for myself. Do you want to press criminal charges? I considered the question. Not unless I have to. Criminal charges mean publicity, court proceedings, my private life becoming public record. Every other fraud case I've worked would be examined through this lens. Did she miss the signs at home? How can we trust her professional judgment? I'd become the story instead of the lawyer. But he committed fraud, Nina pointed out. He forged your signature for nearly $200,000. And he'll pay for it, I said quietly. Just not through criminal court if I can avoid it. I want to handle this personally, Nina. I want to take everything he built with my money and my name, and I want him to know exactly who did it and why. Nina nodded slowly. Revenge. Justice, I corrected. There's a difference. By evening, Nina had made initial contact with the bank, requesting documents as part of a potential fraud investigation. The bank had been cooperative. They wanted to avoid liability for approving a loan based on forged documents. We'd have the full file by tomorrow. I arrived home at 7, my normal time. Marcus was already there, cooking dinner in our kitchen. The domestic scene would have been touching if I didn't know what I knew. Hey, he said, looking up from the stove. I'm making that Thai curry you like. Smells great, I replied, setting my briefcase by the door. How was your day? Pretty good. Landed the Peterson account. They're going with our full digital marketing package. Congratulations. I poured myself a glass of wine, studying him over the rim. He looked relaxed, happy even. No guilt shadowing his expression, no nervousness in his movements. Either he was an exceptional liar, or he genuinely believed he'd gotten away with it. We ate dinner together, discussing our days like we had hundreds of times before. He told me about the Peterson account, about office politics, about his manager's latest ridiculous directive. I told him about a case I was working on, carefully edited to remove any details that might make him paranoid. You're amazing, he said suddenly, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. The way you handle these complex cases, the way your brain works, I'm proud of you. I looked at our joined hands, his thumb rubbing absently across my knuckles, and felt absolutely nothing. The man I'd married had been replaced by a stranger, wearing his face, and I didn't know when the switch had happened. Thank you, I said, pulling my hand back to reach for my wine glass. That means a lot. After dinner, I claimed I had work to review and retreated to my study. Marcus settled in the living room with a basketball game. The normalcy of it was surreal, as if we were still the couple we'd been 6 months ago, before he'd forged my signature, before he'd funded his girlfriend's boutique with money stolen from our future. I pulled up Sienna's Instagram again, scrolling through 6 months of posts. The boutique's grand opening had been elaborate. Champagne, local fashion bloggers, carefully curated Instagram moments. In one photo, Sienna stood by the cutting ribbon, radiant in a designer dress. The caption read, "Dreams do come true. Thank you to everyone who believed in this vision. Special thanks to my silent partner who made this possible." Silent partner. Was that what she called Marcus? Or was it a knowing reference to the fact that his wife, me, was the actual unwilling partner in this venture? I saved the post, added it to my evidence file. My phone buzzed. Nina. Bank sent preliminary docs. You need to see this. Can you talk? I stepped into the hallway, closing the study door, and called her back. What did you find? Rachel, the loan application has 2 signatures, yours and Marcus's. But the handwriting analysis on the supporting documents shows a significant inconsistency. Whoever signed your name also filled out your portion of the employment verification, the income statements, all of it. It's all the same hand, not yours. He filled out the entire application himself and just forged my signature? Looks like it. And here's the interesting part. The loan officer who approved it? She's no longer with the bank. She left 3 months after approving your loan. I pulled her employment records. Her name is Valerie Chen. And before she left, she approved 7 other loans that were later flagged for irregularities. My mind raced. You think she was deliberately approving fraudulent loans? I think it's worth investigating. If she was corrupt, Marcus might have paid her to overlook the discrepancies. If she wasn't, she was just incompetent. Either way, the bank has liability. Which gives us leverage, I said slowly. If the bank approved a loan with obvious red flags, they're partially responsible for the fraud. We can use that. Exactly. I'm still digging into Valerie Chen's background. But Rachel, there's something else. The business account where the loan money was deposited? It's not just for Luminous Designs. There are regular transfers to another account, a personal account in Marcus's name only. I felt ice slide down my spine. How much? Over the past 6 months? About $30,000. Small transfers, usually a few thousand at a time, but consistent. So it wasn't just about funding Sienna's dream. Marcus had been skimming money for himself too. The betrayal had layers. Send me everything, I said. Every document, every record, every transaction, already in your secure folder. Rachel, this is really bad. This isn't just fraud. It's systematic theft. You could press criminal charges and he'd do serious time. I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes. I know. But I need more before I make that decision. Keep digging into Valerie Chen. I want to know if she was paid off or just incompetent. And trace those transfers from Marcus's account. I want to know what he spent that money on. After ending the call, I stood in the hallway for a long moment. From the living room, I could hear Marcus cheering at the TV. A normal night, a normal life, built on lies and forged signatures. Tomorrow, I would start phase 2. Tomorrow, I would pay a visit to Luminous Designs. But tonight, I returned to my study and continued building my case, one document at a time, preparing for the moment when I would tear down everything Marcus had built on the foundation of my stolen identity. After all, I wasn't just Rachel Winters, the lawyer. I was Rachel Winters, the plaintiff, and I was going to win. Luminous Designs occupied a corner storefront in the Pearl District, all floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist aesthetic. Through the glass, I could see carefully arranged clothing racks, soft lighting, and the kind of curated emptiness that screamed expensive. A sandwich board on the sidewalk advertised, "Sustainable luxury fashion," in elegant script. I'd chosen my outfit carefully this morning. A charcoal gray suit from Brooks Brothers, modest jewelry, my hair pulled back in a professional bun. I looked exactly like what I was, a successful attorney conducting business. Not a wronged wife coming to confront her husband's mistress. The distinction mattered. A bell chimed softly as I pushed open the door. The interior smelled of sandalwood and something floral. Sienna Chase emerged from a back room, her smile professional and welcoming. "Good morning. Welcome to Luminous. Can I help you find something?" Up close, she was even more striking than her photographs suggested. Natural beauty enhanced by minimal makeup, wearing what was probably a $1,000 dress made to look effortless. She projected confidence and warmth, the kind of person who made you want to be her friend. I hated that I could see why Marcus had been drawn to her. "Actually," I said, pulling a business card from my purse, "I'm here on a legal matter. I'm Rachel Winters, attorney at Garrison & Associates. Do you have a few minutes to speak privately? The warmth drained from her face, replaced by wariness. A legal matter? Is this about the business? In a way. Is there somewhere we can talk? This is sensitive. She hesitated, glancing toward the window as if checking for witnesses. My office is in the back. Follow me. The office was small but well-appointed, with a desk covered in fabric swatches and design sketches. Sienna closed the door and turned to face me, her arms crossed defensively. What's this about? I remained standing, keeping my voice neutral and professional. 6 months ago, your business received a deposit of $180,000 from Pacific Trust Bank. That money came from a home equity loan fraudulently obtained using forged documents. The color drained from her face. What? No. That's not... The signature on the loan documents was forged, I continued, watching her carefully. The loan was taken out against a property I own without my knowledge or consent. The money was then transferred to your business account. Sienna sank into her desk chair, her hand over her mouth. Oh my God. I need to know, Ms. Chase, what you knew about the source of that money. Were you aware the loan documents were fraudulent? No, She looked up at me, and I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Marcus said it was his money. He said he'd secured a business loan through his connections. I didn't know it was fraud. I swear I didn't know. Marcus, I repeated, letting the name hang in the air between us. You're referring to Marcus Winters, my husband. The fear turned to horror. Your husband? You're his... She stood up abruptly, backing away from me. I didn't know he was married. He told me he was divorced. He said the divorce was final 2 years ago. I'd prepared myself for many possibilities, but not this one. The surprise must have shown on my face because Sienna's expression shifted to something like desperate hope. You didn't know about me either, did you? She asked. He kept us both in the dark. I pulled out my phone, showing her our marriage certificate, still very much valid. We've been married for 5 years. There's been no divorce, no separation. We lived together in the house he took the loan against. Sienna sat back down heavily, her hands shaking. I'm going to be sick. I need you to tell me everything, I said, my voice softer now. This wasn't what I'd expected. A co-conspirator revealed to be another victim. From the beginning. How did you meet Marcus? She took a shaky breath, her eyes filling with tears. 14 months ago. I'd just moved here from Seattle and I was working at a boutique downtown. He came in shopping for a gift. For you, I guess. We started talking about fashion, about my dream of opening my own store. He said he worked in marketing, that he understood branding and business development. When did it become personal? He asked me to dinner a week later. Told me he'd been divorced for 2 years, that he was ready to date again but taking it slow. He was charming, supportive of my business ideas. We started seeing each other regularly. I pulled out my notebook, taking notes like I would in any client meeting. When did the subject of funding come up? About 4 months in. I'd found this space and I had some savings, but not enough. I mentioned needing investors. Marcus offered to help. He said he had access to business capital, that he believed in my vision. She wiped at her eyes. I thought he was being generous. I thought he saw potential in me in the business. Did you sign anything? Any loan documents? Just the business registration and the lease agreement. Marcus handled the financial side. He said the money came from a business investment fund he managed. I never saw the actual loan documents. She looked at me, her expression desperate. I know how this sounds. I know I should have asked more questions, but he was so confident, so supportive, and I wanted this so badly. I studied her carefully, applying the same scrutiny I'd use on a witness. Her body language suggested genuine distress, the trembling hands, the tears, the way she couldn't maintain eye contact. Either she was an exceptional actress, or she was telling the truth. Did Marcus ever ask you to sign anything with my name on it? No, never. I didn't even know your name until you walked in here. She paused. Wait, Winters? Rachel Winters. You're the fraud litigation attorney. I've read about your cases in the business journal. Yes, which makes this particularly ironic. I sat down across from her. Ms. Chase, I believe you didn't know about the forgery, but I need your cooperation. I'm building a case against Marcus, and your testimony would be crucial. What kind of testimony? First, a detailed account of everything Marcus told you about the money's source. Second, any documentation you have, emails, texts, bank records showing the transfer. Third, your willingness to testify that you believed the funds were legitimate. Sienna nodded slowly. You're going after him legally. Yes, but I want to give you an option first. If you cooperate fully, I'll work to keep you out of any criminal proceedings. You were deceived just like I was. However, the money will need to be returned. The entire amount plus interest. Her face went pale again. $180,000? I don't have that kind of money. I've spent most of it on inventory, renovations, operating costs. The boutique is my entire life savings. I understand. But it was never legally yours to begin with. The loan was fraudulent, which means the business was funded with stolen money. I softened my tone slightly. I'm not trying to destroy you, Ms. Chase, but I need to recover what was taken from me. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she looked up, her eyes were red but determined. What happens to Marcus? That depends on several factors. The strength of the evidence, whether he has assets to seize, whether I choose to press criminal charges. Are you going to press charges? I considered the question carefully. I haven't decided yet, but I will recover every penny of that money, one way or another. Sienna stood and walked to a filing cabinet, pulling out a folder. These are all the documents Marcus gave me about the funding. Bank transfers, the deposit confirmation, everything. You can have copies. I took the folder, flipping through it. Everything was there. Proof that Marcus had orchestrated this. Documentation that would support Sienna's claim of ignorance. This is helpful. Thank you. What happens now? She asked. Do I have to close the boutique? That's not my decision to make. But realistically, if all your capital came from fraudulent funds, you'll need to find legitimate financing to continue operating. The bank will want their money back once this comes to light. I'll lose everything. You'll lose the business you built with stolen money, I corrected gently. I'm sorry you were caught up in Marcus's fraud, but the consequences are unavoidable. She nodded, wiping away fresh tears. When are you going to confront him? Soon. But first, I need you to do something for me. I need you to continue acting normally around Marcus. Don't let him know we've spoken. Don't change your behavior. You want me to keep seeing him? Can you do that? I know it's asking a lot, but if he suspects I'm investigating, he could destroy evidence or hide assets. I need a few more days to solidify everything. Sienna looked at me with something like respect. You're not just his wife. You're building a legal case. I'm protecting my interests and ensuring he faces appropriate consequences. Can you help me? Yes, she said after a moment. He's supposed to come by tomorrow evening. I'll act like nothing's changed. Good. And one more thing. I need you to forward me any emails or texts from Marcus, especially ones where he discusses the money or the business. Can you do that without arousing suspicion? I can send them from my work computer. He won't see the outgoing emails. I stood, extending my hand. Thank you for your cooperation, Ms. Chase. I know this isn't easy. She shook my hand, her grip surprisingly firm. I really didn't know. About you, about the forgery, any of it. I believe you. And surprisingly, I did. You were another one of Marcus's victims. The difference is you can still walk away from this relatively unscathed if you cooperate. As I left the boutique, I felt the weight of the folder in my briefcase. More evidence, more documentation. The case was building itself. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. Nina. Found something on Valerie Chen. We need to talk. Back at my office, Nina was waiting with her laptop open and several files spread across the conference table. Valerie Chen, the loan officer who approved your fraudulent loan, she began without preamble. 3 months after approving your loan, she left Pacific Trust, but it wasn't voluntary. she was fired for approving loans that violated bank policy. What kind of violations? Insufficient documentation, questionable income verification, loans to borrowers who shouldn't have qualified. The bank conducted an internal audit and found a pattern. Your loan was one of 12 she approved in her final 6 months that had red flags. I sat down, processing this. So either she was incompetent or corrupt. I'm leaning toward corrupt. Look at this. Nina pulled up a bank statement. 2 weeks after your loan was approved, Valerie deposited $15,000 in cash into her personal account. A week before that, $10,000. Both deposits right after approving questionable loans. She was taking bribes. Looks like it. Which means Marcus probably paid her to overlook the forgery. If we can prove that, it's not just fraud, it's conspiracy and bribery. I leaned back, thinking through the implications. Where is Valerie Chen now? Working at a small credit union in Beaverton. Much lower position, much lower pay. The big banks won't touch her after her firing. Can we prove Marcus paid her? That's harder. The cash deposits could be from anywhere. But I pulled Marcus's bank records, the ones from his secret account. 2 weeks before each of Valerie's suspicious deposits, he withdrew large amounts of cash. $20,000 3 weeks before your loan was approved. Another $10,000 a week later. That's circumstantial, but it's a pattern. I drummed my fingers on the table. What about the other borrowers whose loans Valerie approved? Any connection to Marcus? Nina smiled grimly. That's where it gets interesting. 2 of them work at Cascade Digital Marketing, same company as Marcus. The pieces were falling into place. He was running a scheme, helping other people get fraudulent loans through Valerie, probably in exchange for kickbacks, and using the same loan officer for his own fraud, knowing she could be bribed to look the other way. I pulled up the evidence folder on my laptop, adding this new information. We need to interview Valerie Chen. She's the weak link. If we can get her to admit Marcus bribed her, we have him on multiple felonies. She won't talk unless she has immunity, Nina pointed out. She'd be admitting to crimes. Then we offer immunity. I'll contact the district attorney's office, explain what we've found. If Valerie cooperates and testifies against Marcus, they'll deal. Nina looked at me carefully. Rachel, once you involve the DA, this becomes a criminal case. Are you sure that's what you want? I thought about Sienna, crying in her boutique office. About the years I'd spent building my career while Marcus practiced forging my signature. About the casual way he'd kissed me goodbye this morning, knowing he'd stolen nearly $200,000 from our future. Yes, I said finally. This is bigger than just my loan. Marcus was running a fraud scheme and he needs to face criminal consequences. Okay, I'll set up a meeting with the DA's office for tomorrow. Good. And tonight? I'm confronting Marcus. Nina's eyes widened. Are you sure you're ready? I have everything I need. The forged documents, the evidence of the affair, the money trail, now the bribery scheme. There's nothing he can say that will change the facts. I close my laptop. Besides, I'm tired of pretending everything's normal. I want my life back. That evening, I prepared for the confrontation with the same care I'd use for a major trial. I arranged the evidence chronologically on my desk. The bank documents, the forged signature samples, the photographs of Marcus with Sienna, the transaction records. Everything organized, everything documented, everything ready to present. Marcus came home at 6:30, carrying takeout from our favorite Thai restaurant. Thought we could have a quiet dinner, he said, smiling. You've been working so hard lately. Actually, I said calmly, I need to talk to you about something. Can you come into my study? Something in my tone made him pause. What's wrong? Come into the study, Marcus. He set down the takeout and followed me, his expression shifting from confusion to concern. When he saw the evidence spread across my desk, the concern became fear. Rachel, what is all this? Sit down. I don't understand. Sit down. He sat, his eyes darting over the documents, and I saw the exact moment he realized what he was looking at. His face went pale, his hands gripping the armrests of the chair. I'm going to ask you some questions, I said, standing behind my desk like I was addressing a hostile witness, and you're going to answer them honestly. Do you understand? Rachel, I can explain. Question 1. Did you forge my signature on a home equity loan application 6 months ago? Silence. His jaw worked, but no sound came out. Let me rephrase. I know you forged my signature. I have the documents. I have your practice notebook. And I have a handwriting expert who will testify that the signature isn't mine. So the question isn't did you, it's why did you? I was trying to help someone, he said quietly. Sienna Chase. His head snapped up. You know about Sienna? I know everything, Marcus. I know about the boutique, the affair, the money you've been skimming for yourself. I know about Valerie Chen and the bribery scheme. I know about the other fraudulent loans you helped facilitate. I know all of it. He slumped in the chair, the fight draining out of him. How long have you known? Does it matter? What matters is that you committed fraud, Marcus. Multiple counts. You forged my signature. You stole money from our home equity. You bribed a bank officer. And you lied to both me and Sienna about everything. Sienna didn't know, he said quickly. She thought the money was legitimate. Don't go after her. I've already spoken to her. She's cooperating with my investigation. I pulled out a file. These are your options. Option 1. You agree to a divorce, surrender all assets to cover the loan repayment, and sign a confession that can be used in criminal proceedings if necessary. In exchange, I'll consider not pressing charges immediately. And option 2? I press charges now. Fraud, forgery, bribery, conspiracy. The DA's office is very interested in your scheme with Valerie Chen. You'll face multiple felonies, Marcus. You could do 10 years. He was shaking now, his composure completely shattered. You'd send me to prison? You stole from me. You forged my signature. You used my identity to commit fraud. What did you think would happen when I found out? I thought I'd have more time, he admitted. I thought the loan payments would come out of the separate account and you'd never notice. I thought I could pay it back before you found out. With what money? The funds you were skimming from the loan? I was going to invest it, grow it, pay everything back with interest. No, Marcus. You were going to continue stealing until you got caught, which you did. I sat down across from him. I want to know why. Why did you do this? Was it just about Sienna? About the money? He was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I was tired of being your shadow. Rachel Winters, the brilliant attorney. Rachel Winters, the senior partner. Rachel Winters, who makes 3 times what I make and never lets me forget it. You didn't have to say it. It was in everything. The way you handled our finances like I was incompetent. The way you explained things like I was stupid. The way you looked at me when I talked about my job. Like it was cute that I had a career too. He looked up at me, and there was genuine anger in his eyes now. I wanted to prove I could be successful too, that I could build something impressive. So you built it with my money and my forged signature? I was going to tell you eventually. When the boutique was successful, when I could show you what I'd accomplished, I was going to tell you everything and pay you back. I stared at him. This man I'd shared a life with, and realized I'd never really known him at all. That's not how this works, Marcus. You don't get to steal and commit fraud and then expect credit for the results. I know that now. Do you? Because you weren't sorry until you got caught. You've been lying to me for months, stealing from me, sleeping with another woman, all while pretending to be a supportive husband. I pulled out the divorce papers I'd had drawn up earlier. Sign these. You get nothing from the marriage. No assets, no property, nothing. In exchange, I'll give you 48 hours before I press criminal charges. 48 hours to do what? Run, hide, get a good lawyer. I don't particularly care, but in 2 days I'm turning everything over to the district attorney. He took the papers with shaking hands. Rachel, please. There has to be another way. There was. It was called not committing fraud. You made your choice, Marcus. Now live with the consequences. I stood, gathering my evidence. You have until the end of the week to move out. After that, the locks change and your belongings will be donated. What about Sienna? What about her? She was a victim of your lies, too. Unlike you, she's chosen to cooperate and tell the truth. I left him sitting in my study, the divorce papers on his lap, and walked out to my car. I drove to a hotel downtown, checked into a suite, and finally allowed myself to feel everything I'd been holding back. The betrayal, the anger, the grief for a marriage that had been a lie. But underneath it all, there was something else, a fierce satisfaction. I'd built my case, confronted the fraud, and taken control of my life. Marcus had chosen to deceive me. I'd chosen to destroy him. And in 48 hours, the real consequences would begin. The 48 hours moved with glacial slowness. I spent them at the hotel, fielding calls from Nina, organizing evidence, and preparing for the meeting with the district attorney's office. Marcus tried calling 17 times. I answered none of them. On the morning of day 2, Nina arrived at my hotel suite with coffee and news. Valerie Chen agreed to meet with us, she announced, setting her laptop on the desk. She's terrified about potential charges. I mentioned we had evidence of bribery, and she practically begged to talk. When? This afternoon. 2 o'clock at a coffee shop in Beaverton. She insisted on somewhere public. Nina paused. Also, Marcus emptied his personal account. Withdrew everything. About $43,000. I'd expected this. He's running, or preparing to. His car is still at the house. He showed up to work yesterday, but his behavior is apparently erratic. His manager called asking if everything was okay at home. What did you say? That you weren't at liberty to discuss personal matters. Nina pulled up a document on her screen. The DA's office confirmed our meeting for tomorrow morning. They're very interested in the bribery scheme. Apparently, they've been investigating loan fraud at several banks, and this fits a larger pattern they've been tracking. I nodded, sipping my coffee. Everything was falling into place with the precision I'd anticipated. Has Sienna sent over the documentation? Everything. Emails, texts, bank transfers. It's all time-stamped and authenticated. She's been incredibly cooperative. Nina hesitated. She also asked if you'd be willing to meet with her again. She said she has something to tell you. About Marcus? She wouldn't say over the phone. But she sounded urgent. I checked my watch. Set it up for this evening. After we meet with Valerie Chen. The coffee shop in Beaverton was exactly the kind of anonymous suburban chain that someone trying to avoid attention would choose. Valerie Chen was already there when we arrived, sitting in a corner booth. Her hands wrapped around a cup of tea like she was trying to draw warmth from it. She looked younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with dark circles under her eyes and an air of defeat that seemed at odds with her professional attire. Ms. Chen, I said, sliding into the booth across from her. I'm Rachel Winters. This is my colleague, Nina Reyes. Thank you for meeting with us. I don't want to go to jail, she said immediately, her voice shaking. I have a son. He's only 6. I can't go to jail? That's why we're here, I replied calmly, to discuss your options. But I need you to be completely honest with me. No lies, no omissions. Do you understand? She nodded frantically. I'll tell you everything. I just need immunity. I need to know my son won't lose his mother. That depends on what you tell us and whether you're willing to testify. Start from the beginning. How did you meet Marcus Winters? Valerie took a shaky breath. He came into the bank about 18 months ago. Said he had some clients who needed loans but had complicated financial situations. He asked if I'd be willing to be flexible on documentation requirements. And you agreed? Not at first. But he was persistent. He'd bring me coffee, chat about my son, make it seem like we were friends. Then one day, he made an offer. $5,000 for every loan I approved from his referrals, no questions asked. How many loans did you approve? 12 over 6 months, including his own. She looked down at her tea. I needed the money. My ex-husband stopped paying child support and I was drowning in debt. It seemed like a victimless crime, rich people getting loans they could probably afford anyway. Except my loan wasn't victimless, I said quietly. My signature was forged. I had no knowledge of the loan until 2 weeks ago. Valerie's face crumbled. I didn't know that one was forged. I swear I didn't. Marcus said you were his wife, that you'd signed everything but couldn't come to the appointment. The signature looked legitimate, because he'd practiced it for weeks. But you didn't verify it properly, did you? You didn't call me, didn't ask for additional identification, didn't follow standard protocol? No, she whispered. I didn't. I'm so sorry. Nina pulled out a folder. We need you to write down everything. Every loan Marcus referred, every payment you received, every conversation you can remember. And we need you to testify before a grand jury. If I do that, I'll lose my job. You'll lose more than that if you don't, I said flatly. Right now, the district attorney's office is building a case against Marcus Winters for fraud, forgery, and bribery. You're either a witness or a co-conspirator. Choose wisely. Valerie stared at me, tears streaming down her face. I'll testify. I'll write it all down. Just please, help me get immunity. I can't lose my son. We'll do what we can, Nina said, her voice gentler than mine. But you need to understand, your cooperation is your only bargaining chip. Don't hold anything back. For the next 2 hours, Valerie detailed every aspect of her arrangement with Marcus. The cash payments always delivered in person. The specific documentation she'd overlooked. The other clients he'd referred, all of them fraudulent loans, though some less obviously so than others. She gave us names, dates, amounts, everything we needed to bury Marcus. By the time we left the coffee shop, we had enough evidence to guarantee criminal charges would stick. That was almost too easy, Nina remarked as we walked to the car. She folded immediately. She's scared and guilty. That combination makes people talk. I checked my phone. What time is Sienna expecting us? 7 o'clock at the boutique. She's closing early to meet with us. The sun was setting over the Pearl District when we arrived at Luminous Designs. Sienna was waiting inside, the lights dimmed, a bottle of wine open on her desk. Thank you for coming, she said, pouring 3 glasses without asking. I needed to tell you something, and I needed to do it in person. I accepted the wine but didn't drink. What is it? Sienna took a large swallow from her glass before answering. Marcus came by last night. He was drunk, paranoid, rambling. He told me you knew everything, that you were going to destroy him, that he needed money to disappear. Did you give him any? No, but he said something that I think you need to know. He said this wasn't the first time he'd done something like this. I felt ice slide down my spine. What do you mean? He told me he'd been scamming people for years. Small schemes at first, fake investment opportunities, fraudulent business partnerships. He said he'd gotten away with it so many times that he'd gotten careless. Sienna set down her glass, her hands trembling. He said his first wife divorced him because she discovered he'd forged her signature on business loans too. The world tilted slightly. His first wife? He was married before you. He told me the marriage ended in divorce, but according to what he said last night, she found out about his fraud and left him. He moved cities, changed some details of his background, and started over. Sienna looked at me with something like pity. You weren't his first victim, Rachel. You were just his most profitable one. Nina had her laptop out immediately, fingers flying across the keyboard. What was the first wife's name? He didn't say, but he mentioned Seattle about 8 years ago. That's before you met him, Nina said to me. Before he moved to Portland. I sat down heavily in one of Sienna's chairs, my mind racing. Everything Marcus had told me about his past had been a lie. He'd claimed he'd never been married before, that I was his first serious relationship. He'd constructed an entire false history, and I'd never thought to verify it. I'm sorry, Sienna said softly. I know this is a lot to process. It's evidence, I replied, forcing my voice to remain steady. Nina, I need you to find the first wife. Marriage records in Seattle, divorce proceedings, anything you can find. If Marcus did this before, there might be a pattern we can use. I'm on it, Nina said, already searching. If there was a divorce in Seattle, it'll be in public records. I stood, walking to the window. Outside, Portland's evening traffic moved in predictable patterns. Somewhere out there, Marcus was probably packing, preparing to run with his stolen money. But now I knew something he didn't. His past was about to catch up with him. There's something else, Sienna said hesitantly. Marcus kept asking about the money I received from the loan. He wanted to know if I'd started paying it back to you, if I'd hired a lawyer. He seemed desperate to know what you were planning. What did you tell him? That I hadn't heard from you since our first conversation. That I was waiting for legal proceedings to start. She paused. Was that wrong? No, that was perfect. Let him think he still has time. I turned back to face her. How much of the loan money do you still have? About $30,000 in the business account. The rest went to inventory, renovations, initial operating costs. I can liquidate some inventory, maybe recoup another $20,000, but that's it. Start the liquidation process. I'll need whatever you can recover. I softened my tone slightly. I know this isn't fair to you, Sienna, but the money was never legally yours. I understand. For what it's worth, I really am sorry I was part of this, even unknowingly. You were a victim too, I said. Marcus is very good at identifying targets and manipulating them. Don't blame yourself for falling for it. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Please don't do this. I'll pay everything back. Just give me time. I showed it to Nina. He's panicking. Good. Panicked people make mistakes. Nina looked up from her laptop. Found her. Catherine Brennan, married to Marcus Winters in Seattle 7 years ago, divorced 8 months later. The divorce records are sealed, but the marriage record is public. Can you unseal the divorce records? With a court order, yes, but that takes time we might not have. Then we find Catherine Brennan and ask her directly. I pulled out my phone. I'll have our private investigator track her down. If she was a victim of Marcus's fraud, she'll talk. The next morning, I walked into the Multnomah County District Attorney's office with 3 folders of evidence, a signed cooperation agreement from Valerie Chen, and a determination that felt like armor. Assistant District Attorney James Reeves met us in a conference room, a sharp-eyed man in his 40s who'd built his reputation on white-collar crime prosecutions. Ms. Winters, he said, shaking my hand. I've read the preliminary evidence you submitted. This is quite a case. It gets better, I replied, handing him the folders. Evidence of fraud, forgery, bribery, and conspiracy. Multiple victims, a complicit bank officer willing to testify, and financial records documenting everything. Reeves spent the next hour reviewing the evidence, his expression growing more serious with each page. Finally, he looked up. This is prosecutable. Multiple felonies, each carrying significant prison time. The question is, what do you want? I want him prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I want every penny recovered. And I want this to be public enough that he can never do this to anyone else. What about the mistress? Sienna Chase? She was deceived. She's cooperating fully and returning what funds she can recover. I don't want her charged, Reeves nodded. And the bank officer, Valerie Chen. She needs immunity in exchange for her testimony. She has a young son, and while what she did was wrong, Marcus was the architect of this scheme. I'll recommend immunity, but I can't guarantee it. That decision comes from higher up. Reeves closed the folders. Ms. Winters, I have to ask, are you sure you want to proceed criminally? This will become public. Your marriage, the affair, all of it will be in court documents and potentially in the media. I'm a fraud litigation attorney, Mr. Reeves. I've built my career on exposing financial crimes. If I let my own husband's fraud slide because I'm worried about embarrassment, what does that say about my integrity? It says you're human. It says I'm weak. And I'm not. I leaned forward. Marcus stole from me, lied to me, and manipulated multiple people to fund his schemes. He's done this before, and he'll do it again if he's not stopped. I want him stopped, Reeves smiled slightly. Then we'll stop him. I'll bring this before a grand jury next week. In the meantime, we'll need to locate Marcus Winters. Do you know where he is? At home as of this morning. But he's planning to run. I'd recommend you move quickly. We'll have a warrant by this afternoon. Officers will pick him up tonight. I felt a savage satisfaction at those words. Good. Nina and I left the DA's office and walked to a nearby cafe. I ordered coffee I didn't want, just needing something to do with my hands. How do you feel? Nina asked gently, like I'm watching my life burn down and holding the match. I stared into my coffee. But also like I'm finally in control again. You know this is going to be hard, right? The trial, the publicity, all of it. I've handled difficult cases before. Not when you were the victim. I looked up at her. That's exactly why I need to see this through. I need to prove to myself that being the victim doesn't make me powerless. My phone rang. The private investigator I'd hired. Ms. Winters? I found Catherine Brennan. She's living in Sacramento now, remarried. I explained the situation, and she's willing to talk to you. She said she's been waiting 7 years for someone to hold Marcus accountable. Can you set up a call? Already done. She's expecting you to call in 10 minutes. I thanked him and ended the call, then immediately dialed the number he'd texted me. Catherine Brennan answered on the second ring. Hello? Ms. Brennan, this is Rachel Winters. Thank you for agreeing to speak with me. Call me Catherine. And you don't need to thank me. When I heard Marcus was finally being held accountable, I wanted to help. Her voice was warm, but carried an edge of old pain. He did it to you too, didn't he? Yes. Forged signature on a home equity loan. Mine was business loans. 3 of them totaling $90,000. I didn't find out until creditors started calling. She sighed. I was young and stupid. I believed everything he told me. By the time I figured out the truth, he'd disappeared with the money. Why didn't you press charges? I tried. But Marcus was good at covering his tracks. He'd made some payments to keep the loans current, and he'd moved to Portland before I could gather enough evidence. The police said it was a civil matter, not criminal. I was left with the debt and no way to recover it. I'm sorry that happened to you. Don't be sorry. Be ruthless. Make him pay for what he did to you, and maybe it'll bring some closure for what he did to me too. Catherine paused. Would you want me to testify? If it would help your case, I'll do it. That would be incredibly helpful. The DA is building a case showing a pattern of fraud. Your testimony would establish that pattern. Then count me in. Email me whatever you need, and I'll send it back signed. After ending the call, I sat back, feeling pieces fall into place. Marcus's entire adult life was a series of frauds and betrayals. And now, finally, he was going to face consequences. That evening, I returned to my house for the first time since the confrontation. Marcus's car was gone. Inside, I found evidence of hasty packing, drawers left open, clothes scattered on the floor, his office ransacked. He'd run. I called Ada Reeves immediately. Marcus is gone. He must have suspected you were coming. We'll issue a warrant for his arrest. He won't get far. We've already flagged his passport and put alerts on his credit cards and bank accounts. He withdrew $43,000 in cash 2 days ago. He could survive on that for a while. He could try. But eventually he'll slip up. They always do. 3 days later, Marcus was arrested at a motel in Eugene, trying to book a room with cash. The police found the remaining money in his car, along with a fake ID he'd apparently purchased online. Adding identity fraud to his growing list of charges, I didn't go to his arraignment. I sent Nina to observe and take notes. According to her report, Marcus looked haggard and defeated, a shadow of the confident man who'd mocked my unemployment at dinner parties. The trial was set for 3 months later. In the interim, I focused on rebuilding. The divorce was finalized quickly. Marcus didn't contest it, couldn't afford to. I recovered $43,000 from his arrest, and Sienna managed to liquidate enough inventory to return another $35,000. The bank, facing liability for approving a fraudulent loan, settled with me for $60,000. Combined with the equity and assets Marcus had purchased with stolen money, I recovered approximately $165,000 of the original $180,000. The remaining $15,000 I wrote off as the cost of freedom. Catherine Brennan flew in to testify, as did Valerie Chen, who received immunity in exchange for her detailed testimony. Sienna testified about Marcus's deception. The evidence was overwhelming. The trial lasted 2 weeks. I attended every day, sitting in the gallery, watching Marcus squirm as witness after witness described his schemes. His lawyer tried to paint him as a misguided husband, trying to help his wife's career. But the evidence of the first fraud with Catherine destroyed that narrative. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all counts: fraud, forgery, bribery, conspiracy, identity theft. The judge sentenced him to 8 years in federal prison, with eligibility for parole after 5. He was also ordered to pay full restitution, not just to me, but to Catherine Brennan and the other victims of his scheme with Valerie Chen. I felt nothing when the sentence was read. No satisfaction, no vindication. Just a quiet sense of completion. Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting. I'd prepared a brief statement. Today's verdict represents not just justice for me, but for every victim of financial fraud. My husband exploited my trust, my identity, and my financial security. He did the same to others before me. The criminal justice system has held him accountable, and I hope this case serves as a warning that fraud, even between spouses, will not be tolerated. I didn't take questions. I simply walked to my car and drove home. 6 months after the trial, I stood in the living room of my house, fully mine now, the mortgage nearly paid off, and looked around. I'd redecorated, erasing the last traces of Marcus's presence. New furniture, new artwork, a fresh coat of paint. It felt like a different home. My phone rang. Sienna Chase. Rachel, I wanted to let you know, I'm closing Luminous Designs. The boutique was built on a lie, and I can't continue it. But I wanted to thank you for not destroying me along with Marcus. You could have, and you didn't. You were a victim too, I reminded her. What will you do now? Move back to Seattle, start over. Maybe work for someone else's boutique for a while. Save money the right way this time. She paused. For what it's worth, I hope you find happiness. Real happiness with someone who deserves you. Thank you, Sienna. Good luck. After ending the call, I walked to my study, the room where I'd discovered the fraud, where I'd built my case, where I'd taken control of my life again. On my desk was a framed copy of my law degree. Rachel Hartley, it read, before I'd become Rachel Winters. I'd reclaimed my maiden name after the divorce, shedding the last remnant of Marcus's presence in my life. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Consultation with new client, 2 p.m. I smiled. Life continued. Cases to win, justice to pursue, work that mattered. Marcus had tried to make me powerless. Instead, he'd reminded me exactly how powerful I was. I gathered my files and headed back to the office, ready to help the next person whose trust had been betrayed, whose signature had been forged, whose life had been stolen by someone they loved. After all, I knew exactly how to win those cases. I'd already won my own. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.